Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Um, Either way, or good evening, whenever you catch this. My name is Kylema Norman, and this is the new normal. Today, we have a special guest. Her name is no other than Tracy Martinez. She is a friend, she is a principal, she is a wife, she's a mom, she's a sister, and she's a daughter. And most importantly, she's Afro Latina. Yes. So Tracy Martinez is coming to talk to us about what it means to be an Afro Latina in America. She has some distinctive viewpoints. I can't wait for her to come in and discuss them with us. But as you know, being Hispanic in America is not as easy as subscribing to whether you are Black or white. It comes with a lot of conversation because neither race definition defines who you are relative to how you feel about yourself and your culture, your beliefs, your religion. Race really puts the kibosh on any inclusion of other peoples. It makes a strict dichotomy of whether things are Black and white. And as you know in life, there are shades of gray, or in this context, shades of Latina. So African diaspora individuals, or people who come from the African diaspora, have different cultures and different languages. And although we've all showed up in our spaces from the continent of Africa, we do not all present the same way. Tracy is going to talk extensively about not being accepted with the Latinas or Latinx communities. And she's also going to talk about how there were certain nuances and issues with subscribing to be solely part of the Black community, because she didn't have the same upbringing culturally that the rest of us had around food and around different things, like even things we say. Here's Tracy, here's Tracy. Hi, Tracy. I can't hear you.
I'm mute myself. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Myself.
Looking beautiful. Hey.
Oh, hi.
How are you? So I'm excited always. You know your friend. Like, woo, here goes Tracy.
Yes.
I introduced you as a mom, as a friend, as everything, a sister, a wife, a principal, but definitely Afro-Latina, and how that posed some issue growing up. But you're going to tell your own story. And that because of our issues with race being dichotomous, being Black or white, that's not even life. Pick one, pick the other. There's shades of gray or shades of Afro-Latina inside of there. So tell me your story, Trace. Go ahead.
Okay, definitely. I love to tell my story, especially if it's going to inspire others and connect. You know, I'm a person that has great value on relationship and people. So I'm just want to say thank you for this opportunity to just say my story, and if it can, you know, help others see themselves in humanity and inspire and encourage, most importantly. I'm just grateful, right? So I'll just start with who I am. Both of my parents are from Guatemala. Met and, you know, married in Guatemala. And being Guatemalan, you know, and being Garifuna, for them was something of great pride, but also of, so in the times that they were, challenge. You know, my mother was Mastica, which is, you know, the Indians from there, from Guatemala, and my father with a part Garifuna, and my father being Garifuna as well. And so my mother, for the most part, faced a lot of racism for being, you know, Indian, as opposed to Garifuna. And so, you know, seeing just their embracing of themselves, because my mother fought, she was very proud of herself. And she said, you know, she did not want to be mistreated because of her race, because of who she was. But growing up and seeing sort of my mother's fight, and having to learn to understand who I am and how to develop that own sense of self-identity. Right. So I grew up in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, in a largely Italian neighborhood, right. And not seeing people that looked like me. Most of my elementary school years was in PS 132. largely a Polish and Italian population. I had a wonderful friend, you know, I think about her now. So, you know, just one friend, and she moved away and then became very lonely. But again, nobody that looked like me.
Right.
And then
Nothing like the Williamsburg, Bushwick area now.
nothing like that. The diversity was very limited, very limited.
Okay.
And my parents, as I said, they both migrated from Guatemala. So my first language was Spanish. I did not speak English until about the third grade. I was in ESL classes, okay. Right? So to have my complexion and to speak predominant Spanish, it was also a challenge. You know, my mother struggled not being able to speak English and advocate for us. But I can say that I am grateful to be able to speak both languages.
That's right, because it's marketable.
Yeah, definitely, you know.
And it's a high intelligence. They always say children who speak multiple languages and adults who speak multiple languages.
No, but I can say that at the time, when I think back of it, there was a sense of shame of not having the words to communicate in English, right? And a sense of frustration. You know, oftentimes still to this day, I look at an item and the word that comes to me is in Spanish, and you grapple with that duality and having to get that English word, right? But now having a sense of pride and understanding that, you know, the language is not what makes you, no. And going to that sense of identity. But then moving to Williamsburg projects during my middle school years and being in a predominantly African-American neighborhood, still not feeling connected.
Wow. That's a shocker to people, though. You know that, like, because you present, my daughter says a lot, you use that word present because it's based on what your eyes see. Because you present Black, you did not feel at home or a sense of belonging.
And ironically, even yourself as a person of color, like, you feel as if you belong. Yeah. I feel like the color connects us. Like, I look at you as my beautiful Black sister and I say, we belong. Yeah. That connects us. But however, that wasn't the case, you know, for the most part with, and part of it, and I have to be very forgiving to, you know, children as well, right? Because they themselves may not know how to grapple with somebody that looks like them but speaks another language, right. Or has a different sense of culture, but also not belonging. And so moving throughout my high school years and still sort of trying to get a grounding of who I was in my identity, but finally coming to find a friend that actually looked like me and sounded like me. You know, my friend Bridget was Afro Latina. Right. And this was the first sense of, I've met somebody like me. Right. And it was an amazing experience, very empowering, because I think as humans, the part that we long for is belonging, right? Connection. That acceptance, connection.
Yeah, connection.
Yep. And so not having a culture that exemplified people that looked and spoke like me in television shows, in media, in you know, anything that you would say, you know, is used in pop culture to identify and to bring community together, not having a reflection of myself, definitely, I think, also caused a sense of a disconnect. Because if I would have seen a celebrity that looked like me, or anybody that looked like me and spoke like me, you know, with the heavy Spanish accent, I would have been like, oh my God, you know?
All we had was Rosie Perez, I think, and that was later. That was later to have our first, and she was a light-skinned Afro Latina, because we grew up in New York the same time. And so I can totally identify with that. Hispanic culture did not infuse into the hip hop scene, major movies or television shows when we were growing up. So I can only, because there's barely finding any African-American characters or entertainment that we saw. So yes.
Exactly. So now imagine Afro Latina. So if there was really any African Americans, imagine Afro Latina. But you know, you say Rosie Perez, and you know, it makes me think when I used to work in the supermarket Western Beef on East New York, and I would go on the mic to make an announcement, and they said, "Oh, you sound like Rosie Perez," and I used to take in a friend. Like, I was like, "Oh my God, I sound like," and I would try to fix my diction to sort of, you know, sound more Americanized. And again, that sense of shame. It wasn't like proud, like, "Oh, I sound like Rosie Perez." You know, no, it was more like you need to sound more Americanized. Wow. But it's later in life that you realize that all of these, what you deemed as challenges, are actually great pillars of development in self. and coming to the most important part of myself. When I attended Brooklyn College, I was taking a linguistics course, and my professor had noted that I was Garifuna, and he was in awe to the point where I was uncomfortable. He was like, "You're Garifuna? I want to study you," and this, and that. And I was like, "Oh, okay." I didn't even know I was that special that I could be studied. I said, and it was then that in attending college and doing some research on my own in terms of who my people were, some of the things that they've overcome, and realizing how my ancestors were really powerful people.
Wow. You're going to share with us what you learned? Because I find that to be amazing. I didn't know all of that about Garifunas.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, just knowing that, we were African slaves, and, the fact that we were then, on the island of St. Vincent, I'm sorry, let me tell the story correctly.
Okay.
But yeah. So we landed on the island of St. Vincent, and from there, still not being wanted, put off on ships, and then pushed out, and actually stayed and remained in Central America, which is Honduras, Belize, and Guatemala, predominantly Honduras and Guatemala.
Okay.
And so my people are found in Livingston, Guatemala, which is a very small island, or Puerto Barrios. And again, facing racism there. When we travel to Guatemala, and we've gone numerous times, even as people of color, you travel by early morning light so that, you don't face that racism and the dangers that come.
So now the issues of distinction is still color, even
Yes.
in come out, and it's because you are now darker.
Yes.
Okay.
So even there, we're the other. Even there, we're the other. On our island, which, I took my daughter when she herself was having some sense of trying to identify herself.
Which is identity is a huge issue.
Yes.
For all of us, our whole lives. Who are we? What are
we?
Right.
And she was facing a lot of what I faced in high school, where, people were saying you sound a certain way, but you look this way. So for her, it was more you sound white, because she is educated, and, God forbid a person
she's well versed in words. Like you have to meet them to know wording, especially since a mom grew up in the English teacher realm. You grow up with words. So yeah.
Exactly. And God forbid a person of color, sound educated, because then they must sound white. But she was having a really, difficult time identifying who she was and seeing herself. And so we were very intentional to take her to Guatemala. And if I can tell you that when she landed on our island, the smile was just such a sense of relief of seeing herself, the features, the cheekbones, the color, seeing her mom and, her aunties in in this realm of space where we all looked the same, spoke the same language. She saw a lot of the foods. Hearing the music that she grew up with from my grandmother.
Home.
Mm-hmm.
Belonging. Good.
Yeah. And so that, I think, really settled her in who and what she was. Gotcha. I saw the difference, right? There was no longer the questioning. And so Garifuna people, going back to the original origins, the fact that we were, Africans taken from our land and now pushed out to sea, and then not wanted in St. Vincent, then landing and migrating to some place that even then, you still didn't belong.
Right.
I think that as people, we have to continue to just identify that the belonging isn't based on others. The belonging is based on us, right? In our inner selves, in accepting who we are, and what we are as just, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I have to say that being Afro Latina has been one of my greatest challenges, but my greatest sense of love, right? Loving my complexion, loving my hair texture, loving every part of me that differentiates me as an individual, as opposed to looking to be the same as others.
So everyone on the show, after they tell their story or history, they come up with solutions. right? And so I hear the solutions in the background of your conversation, because you have become full circle so that you can be this figure of a beacon of hope for
Well,
young girls.
I'm still becoming, only 40.
But we're not there, but you're still a beacon of hope for young people growing up who are, in elementary school and young. And one of the solutions I hear is love. The first one I heard was forgiveness, forgiving people of their ignorance and their lack of knowledge. And then love, loving oneself, and then the sense of belonging, first coming from within and then expressing it to without. And also visiting a place or some space where you feel like you can connect and finding that.
Yes. I would definitely agree with all of those elements you just stated. I know for a fact that if I've had sort of it laid out in that structure, the way I've been able to do it for my daughter, that when she came to me with these conversations, because I had thought it through, I had processed it, I was able to pave a way for her to as you said, to accept herself, accept, that others may need further education in regards to who she is, her culture, and that also, most importantly, that you love yourself, not only for your attributes that are physical, but also your attributes that are, that people may not see, because that's what truly makes you, right? And I think that, especially in this climate and culture, when we think about race, and we think about how we're being judged as people of color as less than, with the Black Lives Matter movement, that if we can all see that, we value people not based on, their physicality, but just as individuals, because we really need to move towards that space.
That's right. That's powerful. That's powerful, because this race definition that they came up with, right, sitting around somebody's living room table like, what can we do next, really has put the world in turmoil. We seek to sort along these lines, and it's caused nothing but division, wars, death, and it's no good thing of it. So we were talking in the last time, and we said, instead of identifying one's race, when you have a conversation, there's other things you can ask. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Like, instead of saying like, oh, you're Black, or, oh, you're Hispanic, what questions or conversations should people have to learn the more?
So, for what I've seen is really around individuality, identifying elements of, of the individual, like what are their personal interests.
That's
and,
right.
And again, it's not looking to group people based on biases, but really look at each person individually. So any question that poses an interest in that person as an individual, outside of their race, outside of, their gender, because that's a separate conversation, right? Because being Afro Latina female has its another set of, pieces that we can explore. But yeah, just posing questions that are open-ended, that really do not have that bias embedded in it. Like similar to the question of, as a person of color, do you like fried chicken? Like that's, many stigmas that are associated, Afro Latina, oh, you must be hot, you must be this, certain biases that just come out, just based on statements. And I also want to just say, I do embrace the elements that connect me to the Hispanic culture, because I really didn't quite touch on that in my, when I initially spoke about my upbringing, but also not feeling like I belong to the Hispanic culture, right? Because of my complexion. Oftentimes you'll hear that, Dominicans may not like Puerto Ricans, and Puerto Ricans, or they don't, it's not that they don't like, but they don't connect. They don't like to feel as if you're jumbling them up in one Hispanic culture. People are very, proud of their culture.
Where they come from.
I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Dominican, right? And so as Latinos, to say that, I'm Garifuna, I'm from Guatemala, right? But to say, oh, well, you look Dominican, or you look Puerto Rican, people, Hispanics do not like to be jumbled. And I think people, as I'm probably sure in Asian culture and many other cultures,
I mean, the ignorance. When you first are introduced, when I was growing up, there was no one of Hispanic descent who played with us, except by the time I got to not middle school, yeah, there was Bruce, and Bruce was Puerto Rican. And that was like it. There was no, so in a lack of knowledge, one tends to, round up people, especially with Blacks, because we don't get to distinguish. Black, you're just Black. You Black from here, or you're Black West Indian, but there's no distinction. That's that race, slave master words imparted to us and ways of being. So you're right. There's such a thing as pride in who you are. So.
And they're entitled to it. I think we're entitled. I'm proud to Garifuna. I'm proud to be Guatemalan. But I also know that can separate, right? That sense of pride. Because I didn't connect with the Dominican culture. I don't connect with the Puerto Rican culture. I appreciate it, but there's particular foods that are connected to the Garifuna culture, like hudutu, right? There's many dishes that I think of that I'm sure that if I showed to somebody that is not Guatemalan or Garifuna, they would say, "What is this? It looks interesting, but I've never seen it." Right. So also understanding that we may be Afro Latinas, but even within, there are variances within our cultures, and being okay with it, going back to that individuality and appreciating each element within every culture. And really, if we as people can say, oh, I love, this, I love to see, Dominicans dance merengue and Puerto Ricans dance salsa, and I want to just partake in that. Like, just value it and appreciate it, and not look at it as something that's separating us as people, but just just learn to see it and value it and appreciate it.
That's right. That's right. All right. So we're nearing towards the end. Tell me some things about a Guatemalan Garifuna I would need to know in order to be a little more educated.
Oh, okay. But then that's another piece. So I often joke with people that I'm Americanized, right? So I struggle with some of the elements of what I was taught, but there is that sense of it being a very machismo culture. The man is very dominant, the woman is very subservient. And even, I'm the youngest of four. I do have two sisters, and we, amongst ourselves, we have a conversation around, just seeing the women in our culture serving the men, serving the meal, and the with the dishes and the drink, and the woman's running around doing all of the, domesticated items, which I think in most cultures,
most cultures where there's African people of the same.
Yeah. I don't know how, and that's what I'm saying, like the variances are really there, and it's hard for me to sort of say that because I am Americanized. So I was going to bring that piece in as well. Right. But having watched and observed my mother, she'll still give me advice. So, oh, do this for Gerald, do that for Gerald. Gerald's my husband. Right. And so, it's still that sense of, no, I think my American side is not really liking that as much. So I'll be a little more independent from that. But so I'll take the American pieces that work for me, and then the other pieces that I'll keep my pride in my food and the dishes and the dancing. But yeah, so it's hard to answer that question because I do see myself as an American woman. But I know that I'm Garifuna. I appreciate all of my cultures, my cultural elements. Let me say.
Okay, so give me one of your cultural elements that you appreciate.
We love a good time. We love to laugh.
Good.
Yeah, we do love a good time, and it may be an island thing, but, very laid back. The siesta is still something that's still standing. And when you go to Guatemala, where, you eat the heavier meal, you rest in the day. Okay. Yeah. So, very laid back people. Right. Which is in comparison to, just the United States, where it's that hustle and bustle and the go. Right. That's not the case. When you go to Guatemala, there is more of a sense of relaxation. Recently my father passed, but the one thing he passed desiring was just to lay by the beach, hear the sound of the water, and enjoy life. One thing he always said is that he wanted to sit and write his memoirs. Yeah, and so
a writer. You see where you get it from.
But that, he built a chicken hut, and he had his palm trees, beautiful white 2-story home, and lived, you know, it had the terrace where he would just sit and just watch people walk by. And it's just that.
I don't know what culture you come from that doesn't sound like a dream.
I know, look, but that was, you know, that's really what happens on a consistent basis, that at the end of the day, there really is that sense of just talking to my neighbor, spending time playing, you know, card games, and really just enjoying the traditional ways of spending time with the people that you're surrounded with.
Right.
You know, I think that I appreciate technology. I love technology, but I also know that it can be very individualizing, where you're on your phone by yourself, right? As opposed to having those family meals and just spending time shooting the breeze. But that's not the case in Guatemala. There really is that sense of, you know, just appreciating the people around you.
Amazing. Amazing. So that was my cat. I mean, I was wondering she was going to jump up here to look at us to talk about what it means to be on this home. But nevertheless,
Oh,
that's a cat. Oh, I got a cat. Lola the cat girl, Lola Patola. She be doing the most. But the next thing I wanted to ask you is whatever words of wisdom for young girls growing up, because you're a principal. That was a trajectory of excellence. And everybody has their dream. And I'm sure you got more aspirations beyond that, right? So how do you speak to that young girl growing up and not seeing anything, or not, you know, not knowing how to fit in the world? What's your words of wisdom?
Well, you know, and as you said, you know, I have many years of education, and I have my teenager and my 8-year-old. And what I can say is that make the world what you want it to be. Even though you may not see yourself in certain individuals, seek it. And because once you seek it, you shall find. Embrace the women that have walked the path before you. You know, I think that there's a disconnect between honoring our women as they age and having conversations with them to learn from their wisdom. And that in itself is a key element of growing into the young lady and the woman that you are going to be. You know, I'm very intentional of sitting with women that have gone through certain situations in their lives, and having those conversations. That mentorship and that guidance, that is the most key element that you can have. Okay. And they may see it from a different perspective because of the time and the context, right? But wisdom, it really, if I had to say, it has been the one element that has taken me from the projects into now looking to purchase my own home, into having a family, into being a principal, is being able to seek wisdom and follow wisdom, and being able to see the manifestation of that wisdom in the lives of many great women that I surround myself with. And so if I had to say anything to, you know, you young ladies, is to assure that you're surrounding yourself with women that have walked some challenging paths, and for you it may not seem challenging, but just learn from their process, because life is about the process. It's about honoring the process, honoring the journey, loving yourself through it, learning from those moments where you may feel shame, embarrassment, and realizing that there really are growth points, and having those conversations and not isolating yourself, but really looking to build a tribe and a community of women that will support you. Because that's what we need to do as women, is to continue to support each other.
That's right. And that transcends whatever background you have, whatever you present as a race or culture, finding good role models, but including in it people who look like you, so that you understand you can do it too. Well, that was a beautiful segment. Thank you so much for all your stories and your words of wisdom. I'll see you on the other side. And once again, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure as always. It's so good to see you. You look amazing.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. Okay. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Tracy Martinez with her words of wisdom, being a Garifuna Guatemalan woman, Afro Latina, and her words were clear. When you are growing up as a woman of color, it's necessary to find other women of color in order to see your image of excellence projected in a future self. However, as women, we need to surround ourselves with helpful, intentional, wise individuals who we may not always see eye to eye due to the times, but we definitely understand to uplift each other and keep each other accountable. Also, remember that it's definitely necessary to be mindful that although someone may look a certain way, that's not who they are indeed. There are many depths of an individual that don't meet the eye. And so we should not be ignorant to think that black and white is a true classification of who we are. We are more than hues of skin and melanin in our blood system or in our DNA. So I love you to come back. Please like this show. Tracy Martinez, shout out to you and your family. Thank you so much for your time. This is the new normal, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.